So quickly, I'm just going to go down and give a quick introduction, and I'm going to let each of the panelists tell us a little bit more about themselves, maybe like about 1 minute, and then we're going to have a little bit of discussion questions that Ray and I have formulated, and Seth had sent us some questions that would be relevant that he drafted up. And then when it's time for the audience to ask a question, if you will raise your hand and come to one of the aisles, I'll come to you so that everybody can hear your question. So just to introduce Mike Shannon, we've got Chelsea Mark and Brenda Mark, real estate investors, short-term rental operators, longtime Alamo REIA members. All right, we've got Seth Teal, real estate broker with Somos Real Estate here, very experienced real estate investor. You are also a member of the City of San Antonio Zoning Board of Adjustments and a really profound expert on short-term rentals, correct? Okay. And then we have Sean, I'm going to mess your name up. Say it. Rakidzich. I wouldn't have even come close. So you're a real estate investor. Your story, your claim to fame was that you were one-time homeless, and now you've got tons of properties and tons of success, and you mentor other individuals, right? Okay. So let's do really quickly, left to right, if each of y'all would just kind of add on to that a little bit, and why some of the things you hope to share this evening.
Hello. Seth Teal, broker, owner, Somos Real Estate, also licensed contractor and home builder, member of the Zoning Board of Adjustment, adjunct member of the Planning Commission's Technical Advisory Committee as well. I've done hundreds of wholesale real estate transactions, hundreds of retail real estate transactions, flipped somewhere between 50 and 100 homes, done about 10 new construction builds, and own a couple short-term rentals, and then obviously many of our clients do as well. So thanks everybody for coming out tonight.
Hi, I'm Chelsea Mark. I've been a member of Alamo REIA for 2 years almost now, and we've been in business with my mom and my dad, Brenda and Sean, and we've been doing traditional like flips and that kind of stuff. And then we found this property that we decided to do Airbnb on, and we did our due diligence, we did all of our research, and discovered that Airbnb was the most profitable way to take it. And it's been a wild ride, for sure. We're very fortunate to be where we're at.
And I'm her mom. We brand ourselves as that real estate family because we like to work together as a team, and we're very excited about the Airbnb journey. We are looking forward to our next properties. We're going to structure them a little bit differently. Instead of investing in the property, we're going to use Sean's model, and he'll tell you all about it.
Hey San Antonio, my name's Sean. I'm the host of a YouTube channel called Airbnb Automated. It's dedicated to teaching people how to use Airbnb. Yeah, to her point, what's strange is I have 60 properties and I own none of them, so I have $0 in equity, but we make about $2 million a year, and I did that in 2 years. So, you can own, or you can find somebody like me and I'll be your tenant, and then I will be your last tenant forever. For your whole building, like 50 apartment building, I'll take the whole thing. That's rental arbitrage, which we can talk about later. Thanks, guys.
Good evening, everyone. Again, I'm Mike Shannon. So I'm the City of San Antonio's Director of Development Services. That means I'm the city's building and code official. Marty, I need to have you as my PR man. Thank you for all the kudos. But this is my second time here speaking on a topic. I'm excited to talk about short-term rentals. So Development Services is your city's zoning or building permits and inspections and code enforcement department. The city recently, back in November, passed a short-term rental ordinance which requires permits for short-term rentals. And like many jurisdictions, not only in Texas or even our country, worldwide had to set some rules to be able to promote and encourage short-term rentals, but also to have some balance. So they don't really destroy neighborhood character and stuff like that. So we have some rules, and we're going to talk about them tonight, and hopefully you guys can be successful. So one other thing, I do have Zeke Solis. Zeke, if you can stand up. So Zeke is one of my senior managers in the department, and he actually runs the permit department for the short-term rentals right now for us. So the permit section. So if you stumped me with a question, I'm going to look to my short-term rental quarterback. So thanks, Zeke, for being here.
Excellent. Well, I think I'll start off with the first question. I want to thank Seth for providing some of these because it's a little out of my wheelhouse. I'm experienced with the short-term rentals. So I'm going to ask Mike and then Seth, if you want to augment, what are the different types of short-term rental classifications and what would be important for somebody in this room to know about the difference between the two?
Sure, and as I answer your question, I may stand, if that's all right with everybody. When we developed our short-term rental ordinance, we found very common. There's really two types of short-term rentals. Those that where the owner of the property lives there, certainly, and rents out a room or a granny flat in the back or something like that. So they live on the property, have control of the property. That's their homestead or where they live. So that's a type 1. And so type 1s, those are allowed by right. You still have to have a permit, come through us, get that permit, but you can have as many of those as you want in a neighborhood, type 1. Type 2 are those where the owner of the property does not live there. So it could be a single-family home, duplex, depending on your zoning and how many units you have. You do not physically live there. We call that a type 2. The difference there, the real difference, is you're allowed some of those in a residential neighborhood by right. Once it exceeds a certain number or density in a neighborhood, there's an extra process if you want to get that. And you may or may not. So if you're an investor and you're not going to live on that property, which I know a lot of you are, we're going to talk tonight about how do you know how many are on a street right now. If I buy this property, can I do a short-term rental there? And then how to kind of capture that quickly so no one else, quote unquote, beats you to the punch. So we'll talk a little bit about that, I'm sure.
What are your thoughts? Have you experienced any roadblocks in terms of helping some of your clients at Somos?
I think the important thing is to know what you're getting into or the strategy that you have before you make the investment. We saw a lot of folks that made investments during the process of the ordinance being vetted, and then the ordinance was picked up, and people that were closing, say 30 days after that, may have had one strategy that no longer they can do without getting a special exception. And depending upon the neighborhood, some people are vehemently against anything that is above the 12.5%, which is allowed per block face by the ordinance. So it's very important to not just assume that you can Airbnb the property that you're not going to live in or short-term rental it. You need to understand what's there. And it's actually readily searchable now on the city's one-stop map. So you can actually go through and choose a layer, and it will show every individual short-term rental that's there.
Did everybody understand what Seth just referenced, the one-stop map? So you can go to the DS.
Yeah, but he said a couple other things. You said 12.5% per block face.
Per block face. So if you have a block with 12 homes on it.
A block, like a block face has two faces. A block has two faces, right?
Two sides of the street, one block face on each side.
Okay. And then there's a back side of that block.
That would be a different block, generally speaking.
Okay.
Not always, but generally.
So basically from street to street and one side, or is it like 400 block to the 500 block, and if the 400 and 600 are on the same block,
in my experience, it's generally in between two streets, not necessarily one city block, not necessarily 100 block, but the block face from street to street.
Okay. What if it's like 5 houses versus 50 houses?
The 12.5% still applies.
Okay.
Gotcha.
And where do you find it?
So you can actually go on the city website and you can just type in short-term rental ordinance, and it brings up a page. It's got a ton of great information. And through that, you can actually find the FAQ pages, the one-page sheets, really give you succinctly everything that you need. And then there's also the city's one-stop map. You can go on the city website, type in a one-stop map. It's very, very user-friendly GIS interface, which is awesome. And then you can go into the advanced settings there, and you can turn on different layers. So you can turn on I was looking for a flood map layer. I haven't found that yet, but there are different overlay districts.
The FEMA is a flood map line.
And it's a very poor GIS website. The cities is far superior to FEMA's, trust me.
But is one of the layers this class short-term?
Correct. So you can actually scroll down under the advanced settings and type in, or you can select short-term rental, and it will bring up everyone in the city of San Antonio. And then you pan to your area and then scroll in, and you can see on your block or individual parcel numbers all the way down.
So let's say that I count, and so 12.5% is 1A. So every 8 houses, right? So if I count and there's 9 houses and there's 1 house on there, what does that mean?
That means that you need to also check accessory dwelling units in the rear, because it's total number of units on the block face.
Oh.
So just because there's 12 houses on that street, maybe 4 of them have an accessory dwelling unit, something of that nature.
Gotcha.
And that's a little trick.
Right. But let's say I see that it's that I would qualify. Now, how do I know that the data is updated regularly? Because I'm making an offer to buy her house based on an Airbnb exit strategy. So I want to make a quick decision. So I made an agreement with her to buy her house. I don't want to close on that damn thing unless I know that I'm going to get that permit. So what's the next step?
There you go. I was just going to say, the one-stop map tells you when it was last updated.
Yeah, so and that's a great point. That's a lot of the questions that actually Zeke and his team field every day from investors that have that exact same question. They can go on the map and they can see, and it's real time within 24 hours. So as a permit's issued, then at the end of the next day, then it shows up on the map. So sometimes that's not even fast enough. And also, before you close, you want to double and triple check. So we have a team taking phone calls every day saying, I'm looking at this address. I've seen it on the map, or maybe I haven't seen the map yet. I want to do a type 2 because I'm not going to live in it. And then our team is there because we want to help you make a good decision before you close. After you close, and if we have to give you bad news, we don't like to do that. But if you do, and then Zeke will check and say, 1, you would be eligible, but to secure your permit,
reserve.
You can apply for and get your permit. A permit is $100. You go online, there's an online portal, you do the work. We will receive that application, do the work, and then once you have your permit, that's you stamping, and then you can close. Okay? If you don't close, and then you don't utilize that permit later, that's fine. You can give up that permit.
Is it assignable? Let's say I buy that property, and then 5 years later I want to sell that?
No, it doesn't go with it does not transfer to a new property owner.
So is there a waiting list? So let's say that I get ready to sell, and I want to say, okay, you're going to have to go down there today. I'm going to release mine. You're going to have to pick it up today. Or is there a waiting list that would?
We do not have a waiting list right now.
Okay.
No. Again, so remember the ordinance is only 6 months old. The actual permit requirements are only 4 months old, so it's still relatively new. So we don't have a waiting list yet, but that when we get to that point, or if we get to that point, we'll likely have to develop.
Now you say it's not assignable, but let's say that I were to buy that property in, say, a trust, and then the person that I was going to assign that deal or wholesale the deal was to buy that property in that trust, then of course that would stay with that trust because they reserved it under that name.
I think as long as the ownership technically doesn't change, but if it does, I would look to probably some of our city attorneys to help answer that question. But if that's a question you want us to get answered, before I give you a maybe answer, we'll take that down and we'll get that back to the group.
We're going to hold the audience questions until a little bit later. So we're going to get hammered.
Well, it's just like if I'm like you said, you wholesale it. If I'm a wholesaler and I got this guy that wants to buy an Airbnb, I may need to put it in a contract under my name or under entity name, then assign the contract to him. Then he goes and gets it under that entity. Okay.
Interesting. Do you want to go with the question, or you want me to just run through mine?
Yeah, whatever you want to do.
Okay. So for the ladies, Chelsea and Brenda, I have a little bit of insider knowledge because my wife shot photography for your Airbnb and awesome house. But share with us a little bit of the strategy because you're doing a room by room as opposed to booking the whole house. What led y'all to come to that decision? Tell us a little bit about that and how it's worked out for you and what your thoughts are.
Can I interrupt real quick? Is that considered one unit? Or is that a
So, I think the question you're asking is, if you rent out one room to someone and another room to someone and another room to someone, you need 3 permits. The answer is no. You get a permit by dwelling unit. So you have a dwelling unit, right? Single family home, that's 1 permit. If you choose to rent out the 5 bedrooms to 5 different people, you can. That's 1 permit. The granny flat apartment in the back or whatever it may be, or if you're a duplex, those are 2 permits. So it's not room by room, it's dwelling unit by dwelling unit, which is the full living unit.
And that's a question that is asked on the permit application. It was clarified that way when we applied for the permit.
Gotcha. Okay, good.
I thought I accidentally got you in trouble. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I saw him writing her. Yeah.
But what was that strategy?
We do it's 4 rooms, and we have them listed on Airbnb individually, plus we have the house as a whole as a listing on there, and they can be connected through Airbnb. So when the whole house gets reserved, that blocks off the calendar for the individual rooms automatically through Airbnb. They have it set up that way.
Okay, so I didn't realize you could do both.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
so if the opening's available, they're all available on Friday the 15th through Sunday Monday the 17th or whatever. You could do that. Okay, I did not know that.
Yes.
Can I interrupt? I got a microphone, so I guess I can. What you're bringing up, though, is some interesting things here, because you're saying, like, when do I reserve the 1 dwelling unit, or when do I reserve the individual units? Like, what's my strategy? And also the other strategy is, how does the layout work to accomplish those 2 different goals?
Right. So on the individual rooms, we have keyless locks. So when they're booked individually, they're always locked. And the individual that has it booked is the only one with that code, right? And then when we have the whole house booked out, we can do a pass-through code so that they can go through whenever. And when we very first started, which was in February, we had it just the individual rooms. We didn't have the whole house listing up. But we decided for the summer, for families coming to vacation and go to Six Flags and all of that, we would open up to the whole house. And that's when we started getting a lot of whole house bookings, was for summer vacations and stuff like that. But on the off season, like when school is in, the individual listings were way more profitable. We were booked constantly.
So, of course, I want to understand a little bit about, like, design-wise, how you would lay that out and make that work, but also just give me an example of, like, what the charges are, how the individuals charge compared to the whole house, and then how the cleaning works and stuff like that.
Right. Well, currently for the cleaning, we do it.
Okay.
We haven't hired a cleaning person yet, but we're getting there very soon. And so as for the charging, so we have, like she said, 4 rooms. We have the traditional master suite, has its own bathroom, so we charge a little bit more for that one. And then the house itself had this weird front room area, so we split that up into 2 rooms and connected them with a pass-through door. So it's like it has a bedroom and then its own living area, private living area. And so we charge more for that one. And then for the traditional bedrooms, they share a bathroom.
So the 2
they're a
rooms,
little
that's
bit
like a
less.
suite? Is that what you're saying? It can be used as a single room or a double room? As a suite?
Yes. Yeah. Well, we rent it out as a double room, and it has a couch that folds down, so it can sleep 3 people.
Does it have separate entrance, egress and ingress?
No, it's all through the front door, and that's pretty much it. It's all through the front door. We don't have any other.
And how do you do the
Private
pricing
entrances
on
or
that?
anything like
Just kind of give us a rough idea of what that would look like. Individual versus house.
Individual versus house.
Like a room versus the whole house. You have 4 potential rooms that would rent for how much per room?
The master rents for $56, and we charge a $25 cleaning fee because our time is worth the money.
Right.
And then that covers for when we bring someone in to clean it. And then the prices go down from there based on their size.
And do you make more money renting the whole thing, or do
No.
you make more money renting it individually?
Individual rooms.
The other thing is, like, if somebody rents one of the room, then you're eliminating the possibility that somebody would rent the whole thing.
Or a whole house,
so how do you, what's your theory on placing that? Like, is it a timing thing where you say up to 3 days before we rent it, we'll switch it over to the other type of rent, or how do you do that?
Well, when we opened up the whole house rental for availability, that was after we had already had the individual rooms available. So when we opened it up, because it was just before school or, people were planning their vacations, they jumped on June and July right away.
As a whole house, so
As
they
a whole
would rent
house.
like a week at a time.
Yes, and 3 or 4 days or whatever for a group of 8 or 9, and it's one of those things that just it's going to be a management thing. You have to look at your calendar and you do a little bit of maybe we should block off the whole house for this period of time and let some individual rooms in, because that will increase our revenue a little bit for that particular period of time. But we're also trying to learn about the market in San Antonio too, and understand, what the needs are, and that's not always easy.
Well, since y'all started in February, can you kind of share with us some of the big hurdles you had, and maybe the big ahas, like, hey, this is really going to work, and hey, I think this is going to kill me, and let's dump the whole thing?
Don't give kids chocolate. It's really hard to clean up.
One of the challenges that we are finding with the individual rooms is because the master has that bathroom enclosed within and non-access to the rest of the 3 other rooms, that when we're completely full in those 3 other rooms, that other bathroom is a hot commodity, and some people get a little bit uncomfortable about sharing with that many people. So we're considering adding another bathroom in, which is easy access off of the laundry room with the garage. And
that's good input, though, because when you're really, the cost of changing it isn't that high compared to something that's going to stay rented and be desirable.
Right.
So having a kind of an overall design idea of what it needs to be. So just what you've learned already, you realize that you can optimize that and change it. And what about having separate entrances and stuff to the room? Is that an option?
No, that's not an option with this house, just because you don't want to mess around with the actual footprint of the house we want to keep, because our long-term strategy is if something changes with Airbnb, we would like to have it be a rental house, just a regular long-term rental.
Easy conversion.
Yeah.
One of the things I'm worried about is what would get them to have their permit. Is it a permit or a license? What would get that to be revoked, where they would literally be put out of business because of a mistake they made or something?
Sure, that's a good question. So the ordinance put in some penalties, really, if you aren't following the rules. So if you get 3 confirmed code violations, it's kind of broad, but any type of public nuisance violation, 3 confirmed within a 6-month time, right? So all of us in our home or anything, we could get a code violation. Actually, I can't because I work through the department, right? So, I have to be squeaky clean all the time. But if we get one every other year, that doesn't make us a problem in the neighborhood. But we have had examples of multiple violations, lack of upkeep, lack of quality property management, those type of things. So the ordinance was very clear. If you get 3, it's kind of like the 3 strikes and you're out. 3 within a 6-month period, that's enough for me that I will revoke the permit for up to 1 year. And you'll have an opportunity to come back in that 1 year and try to get it back through a process. So the key for you is to be a quality property manager, not only dealing with your tenants, but certainly with the city codes. And we have a lot of team members here that are working through that. We've held several sessions, like education sessions on what that is and what it means. And we don't want you to get into that 3 strikes and you're out rule, but if you do, then we're going to have to act. So.
Okay. I want to ask, I've been dying to ask Sean a question. So tell us a little bit more about your story. You said something that I didn't know about you until just tonight, about you don't own any of these properties. Go into that a little bit.
So I'm not a real estate person. That's first off. There's going to be a lot of stuff that Ray will talk about, and I have no clue what the acronym means. I'm not a real estate guy. So I originally owned a business that services newspapers. The San Antonio Express News was my client. I helped them not go out of business, like audience development. So I'm a problem solver, and I ended up with 3 apartments in Houston that I'm paying rent on because I relocated sales staff to this high-rise in downtown Houston. And then I had like $5,000 a month in rent because they moved out. So I used Airbnb just to float my rent, and that was the beginning of this whole journey. I learned about lease law, about how to be an LLC signing a lease and the differences. The paragraph 30 in your TAA lease that says that you can't list on lodging websites. I learned how to battle with property management companies over my right to break the use of premise if they gave me a waiver, all sorts of stuff. And that was the beginning. And then Super Bowl hit in Houston 2017, and that's where I'm like, wow, I could probably make a lot of money on Airbnb. I was just floating my rents to that point, and I was still focused on my newspaper business. But then when the Super Bowl hit, I'm like, I need to pick up a lot of units as fast as I can before February. And that was the beginning. So I had 10 apartments by February 2017, and now we have 60 sometime here in 2019.
Are you saying apartments or apartment units?
Units.
Okay.
So yeah, I don't have the whole building or anything.
Okay.
Typically I'll take a floor of an apartment complex, or like a pillar. So if there's 4 studios on top of each other, I'll take all 4 so the neighbors don't walk on each other's roofs and stuff. You want to keep your that noise pollution down between your tenants. And in apartment complexes, that public nuisance thing, you have a party of frat boys who comes into your 2-bedroom apartment at 3 o'clock in the morning, and your neighbors are 10 feet away, that can be a problem. Single family homes, a little bit easier. But I specialize in apartments. I only have picked up single family homes in Philadelphia because surprisingly, there's a lot of companies that do what I do. There's a company called Sonder that's raised like $200 million in capital, and they have thousands of units. You might actually know people like Sonder, Stay Alfred. They probably contacted you for permits, hundreds of them. And so it's a new but big industry. Wow, what it is that I do now.
You just blew my mind.
Yeah. So, but I think where you were going, I was interested, like maybe doing sandwich leases or leasing out other people's properties, and then you turn around and do Airbnb. Is that what you're doing?
So that is called rental arbitrage.
Okay.
The whole point is you pay $1,000 a month or $1,200 a month for a long-term lease. You sign a year-long, 2-year-long lease with the landlord and get the permission to furnish it, and then you put it on the market and try to get $3,000, $3,500 a month for it, and then minus your operating expenses like housekeepers, you can squeeze $1,000, $1,200 per apartment unit in profit every month, and you basically paid for the cost of furniture if you didn't finance your furniture. You can actually kind of get a new apartment for free. Like, for example, I would bug you maybe if you have a high-rise and you have like 20% occupancy. Like, there's buildings that do things called lease-ups. When they're brand new, newly built, they have no tenants. You could go to that building and say, hey, I'll take 10% of your occupancy today, but I want 8 weeks free up front. Then you go and get a loan for your furniture, so you paid no money up front, and you paid no money for your furniture. You fill the place up, you got 10 or 12 units with furniture for free. By the time it comes, you have to pay your rent. You've already made 10 times your first month's rent. And so now you have 10 units with no money down. So it's really scrappy. But even further than that, if you have a good relationship with a developer or an apartment complex owner, I've got a client in Chicago. He has 70 of units like this, so he's passed me up already because he made best friends with a developer, and the guy keeps picking up new properties and calling my guy saying, hey, would you like more leases? Because I'm wanting to buy more. Basically, they have this like Cinderella story, guaranteed tenant, guaranteed like landlord, real estate investor guy, and they're just picking up as many units as they can, and it's working out for both parties.
In case you can't tell, I could ask these guys questions all night by myself. This is real interesting because it's changing the way the world does business. This is changing the way, third to fourth of the owners across the country that own houses are investors. So everybody's thinking about this. Everybody's trying to figure out how to make it work, and the neighborhoods are trying to figure out how to make it work. This is too valuable for us to ignore. If you guys have questions, Kim's going to walk around with a microphone. She did. If you have questions, just raise your hand. She'll do it. But before you let him ask, I got another question for you. So, and I got like 8 more after that. So, on yours, you said you're up to 60 units. So you went to one unit, and I know as a rehabber, the very hardest rehab you ever do is your first one. And you learn about 70% of what you need to know on that first one. You've now got to 60, so maybe tell us a little bit about like the lessons you learned, and more importantly, how you overcame it when you came to stuff when you knew that your back was against the wall, you were going to go under and it wasn't going to work and this is a stupid idea, and somehow you now scaled it and you figured out how to maybe take yourself out of the day-to-day operations?
Well, for the first 20 apartments I set up, I kept forgetting to buy toasters. I just never used one. So like things like that. When you're furnishing an apartment, you have to really think about what is the guest going to use and what is your advantage against a hotel. That's what I learned in the 5 years that I've had 4 years that I've had any Airbnb properties, is that hotels are your biggest competitor because they're the ones with all the real estate. And if you have single-family homes that are 3 or 4 bedroom, you're a completely different product, and now you're not even competing with them anymore. My design sucked bad. I'm a guy, right? Here's a cardboard box and a TV. That's the media room. I really was terrible at design, and it took a long time for me to really create a product that was up to par with what you would want to call a 5-star stay. Being culturally sensitive to people across the world, people ask for the weirdest things, and you just as an Airbnb host, you get in the habit of just saying yes, whatever you want. I've had some really weird requests, aside from like rice cookers and kettles and pack and place for cribs and stuff like that.
Rose petals and candles.
Oh, we've had some, so people want to do like a Valentine's Day thing for their hubby, so they're like, hey, could you set this whole thing up? So we started a personal shopping service where people wanted us to pack their fridge with groceries before they arrived, and we charge them on the Airbnb platform. That lost money because people didn't pay us for their groceries after we bought it. So there's little things like that. I fortunately have done a decent job where I haven't had my back against the wall per se, but I'm a huge risk taker, so I take all of our revenue and I'll try to stuff it back into the market. So 2 years ago, we were making, a little less than 2 years ago, we were making $30,000 a month in revenue, and we had like those 10 units. And in order to get up to $2 million a year in revenue.
Now that's gross revenue.
That's gross. $30,000 to $2 million is our gross. We're netting like 1.2.
Okay.
Which is cool. But in order to get that to happen, like you have to reinvest your profits. So we took a lot of risks. So there's some times where Airbnb actually didn't pay me for like 2 weeks. And I thought it was going to cause me a big problem. They ended up giving me like a $60,000 payout in one day, where they normally pay you every single day. Airbnb, the way it works, somebody checks in, the next day they let you know that everything's good, they're going to pay you, and then you get it in your bank account the next day. So you start to rely on this cadence of money. And so February 10th, I was supposed to get like a $12,000 deposit because somebody robbed a 2-bedroom apartment of mine, and I got an insurance resolution from Airbnb. So yes, they will cover you if somebody robs your whole house blind. But the system broke when they went to give me my $8,000 resolution plus some reservation money. And so for 2 weeks, I didn't get a single dollar because it froze my account when they were trying to give me my money. And if it would have been 5 or 6 days later, I probably would have had to take out a line of credit or a loan to pay all the rents, because if almost 100% of your revenue is coming from one supplier and then they don't pay you when they go into default, you still have to pay your bills. So the one thing I learned there is I actually split my portfolio into 3 Airbnb accounts. So if one has something go wrong, I still am getting cash from 2 other accounts. So it's a business. You manage your suppliers, you manage your vendors, you make sure you don't rely on one thing, which means, we're calling this the Airbnb thing, but short-term rentals, you can do it on Expedia, you can do it on Booking.com, TripAdvisor. You can start your own website and get direct bookings on your own website too.
And so talk a little bit about the scaling, some of the things you went through to scale your business so that you're not the person cleaning it anymore.
Yeah, so I have about 18 employees now. I've got a manager in each city that handles all the operations. We have cleaning teams in each city that handle all the housekeeping. Housekeeping is the biggest point of management if you want to automate a business like this, because the housekeepers see everything. They show up, and if something's stolen or broken, they'll tell you. If everything's like trashed and they need you to block it the listing, the housekeepers are the ones that are there. If a person won't get out and you need to kick them out or call the cops to have a guest escorted off property, the housekeeper is the one that discovers that. So training good housekeepers is the key to scalability. And then, of course, the good leadership keeps them from quitting, and that good leadership replaces them if you have to. That's really the 2 main layers of running a business at scale with this.
Okay, cool. Are there any questions? Anybody have any questions?
I actually had a question. I think you kind of may have answered it. So we've done the same thing, but so my question's to Sean. So we have done houses instead of apartments. We're looking at doing apartments, but my concern is losing that personal touch, because I don't want to lose our superhost status because I can't meet someone at 1 a.m. in the morning when they want to check in. And so I get that you have a team, but my other thought is, okay, if I pay someone to go and meet someone at 1 o'clock, how easy is it going to be for my employee to go and do that?
You can set the check-in limit to midnight instead. You just make it not possible for somebody to check in after midnight if you'd like to. You create those restrictions. We used to have it as flexible, and that was bad because if somebody shows up at 5 a.m. and it's technically flexible, you'll lose any argument with Airbnb because you didn't have a check-in limit time. You can do that. Also, if you have 60 properties, you will lose your superhost status. I guarantee it.
Yeah.
And I remember the first time I lost superhost, and then I got it back again, and I lost it, and I got it back again.
And as we use terms, let's kind of define them, like what superhost is.
So Airbnb has this kind of incentive structure where if you're at the top of their class, you get a little boost. And if any of you know about Google's SEO algorithm, where things get on the first page, Airbnb has something like that. If you have the best property in San Antonio, you have nothing but 5-star reviews, and you have a ton of them, and your listing's been around a long time, and you've got a lot of tenure, when people search for properties, as long as you can accommodate them, like your dates are actually open when they search, and you can serve 10 people when they have a group of 10, you'll end up on the first page of that search result. They'll filter out everybody in the bottom. So Superhost gets a boost. They're more likely to be on the first page search if you're Superhost. But in my experience, our revenues change very slightly between Superhost and not. But of course, if you have less properties, being Superhost is a great thing if you can keep it as long as you can.
Is that a benefit of having 3 accounts?
The benefit of having 3 accounts is you can take all of your luxury properties, the ones that will wow your customers, and you can make sure you get 5-star reviews on all your best properties. And if you have a sketchy building where like you did a guy a favor, he gives you really low rent, like it's $500 per month per apartment, but nobody's going to call it a 5-star hotel. It's just impossible to get 5-star reviews. You can segregate those away from your luxuries, so you don't get like these 3.5. Oh, it's great for the price, but definitely not 5-star. You don't want those weighing down your really nice house. So you can segregate those with multiple accounts.
Okay, so I have one more question. This one's for Mike. So we have we're starting to go through the permit process for all of our houses. But one thing that I heard from someone within Airbnb is that I don't know if you can answer this, but certain cities have it to where when the guest books on their side, all of those occupancy taxes and the taxes that the city's starting to send to us get sent to the guest. Are you guys working with Airbnb so that the guest is having to pay it so that I'm not having to write a check?
So right now that is not an option. So you as the short-term rental operator, you're responsible for collecting and then paying the city, and actually we collect the county tax. And so, but we have been asked by our city leadership, mayor and council, so our finance director, kind of my counterpart with the money part of the city, is working with not only Airbnb, but some of those other large hosts, and to see what that would look like. So to make it easier for you to charge them through the transaction, but it goes automatically to us, and you don't have to be the tax collector and then the tax giver, if you will. I'm probably using the wrong terms, but right now that's not an option. It is a little those talks. Airbnb and some of the others they've expressed some. Well, if you work with us, you're gonna have to waive all those back taxes for those that should have been paying it for the last several years. That's not something the city's willing to do at this point, but I don't know if that'll be the case in the future. But we do want to make it easier for you to pay your taxes locally, like Airbnb has at the state level. But right now, it's not an option. So that's the short piece.
Hey, Mike, question for you. So I went to the D1 brief about 2 months ago. Thank you for that. My question is more like, I applied for a type 1 because I'm living in my house. Someone in your staff thought it wise to give me type 2 because someone, while in the application process, applied for a type 2. So when I got my permit, I was like, whoa, type 2. Great. Now that means no one else on this block because I have like 6 houses on one row in my block. My question is type 2, type 1 tax differences? Are there any?
No, the tax rate at the state or local level, they're all set. They're just a percentage. It has no difference on type 1, type 2. Type 1 and type 2 is only in San Antonio, and I know other jurisdictions that have passed laws like this, just tells you if you can have this permit maybe in this zone, whether it's a neighborhood, a commercial, a multifamily apartment structure, whatever. And if it's type 2, you may have a density limit within that zone, meaning we landed on a 1/8, which is the 12.5%. But there's no tax difference.
You got property taxes?
I'm sorry?
Even on property tax?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I was talking about HOT, the hotel occupancy tax. Property taxes, no. Property taxes won't affect, right now, your valuation. Do we still have our Bear County guys here? That would be a good question for them. I think moving forward, I know San Antonio, because we're tracking them now, have 1,200 and some odd permits already, 800 others that we think might be operating without permits yet, so we're starting to have those discussions, maybe a couple more, but we'll maybe have to talk to Bear County about that and how that affects their valuation structure.
Hi, Rob Slaughter. I actually have two questions. We're talking about taxes. What is the tax, the hotel occupancy tax? And two, going back to homes, what if you find a home that's in the neighborhood that's linked to a HOA and they have like a 6-month limit or minimum? Can the HOA override the city's ordinance?
So we're going to get you the number, because I actually have, we have handouts on this, and I forget the exact number, 16 some odd percent, but we'll get those. Let me answer the HOA question. So the city has a set of rules, and your HOA will have deed restrictions if you're in a deed restriction HOA. Thank you, Zeke. And I'll get to this. So let me put this way. The city cannot enforce deed restrictions. So a lot of times the HOA will have some rules that say you cannot have a short-term rental. You cannot operate a short-term rental in that. Now, many of you in this area have heard of the state Supreme Court decision about a year ago, where someone in Timberwood Park, that's not COSA, but they had an argument about what the HOA deed restriction said. And they were a very common deed restriction language. It's probably, if you're in an HOA or have properties in an HOA, they're probably 80 or 90% the same, okay? They thought, the HOA thought it restricted them, and the Supreme Court said that language does not actually say you can't have a short-term rental, so it invalidated that language. Now, all the HOAs are scurrying right now to try to upgrade or modify their HOA deed restrictions, which is a challenge. I think to do that, a lot of times you need 60 or 70 or 80% of the homeowners to all agree. It's not an easy thing, but again, HOA can be above city rules, but it can't weaken city rules. Okay, so think of it that way. But when we get called out by an HOA resident that says, hey, they're violating my HOA deeds and covenants, but if it meets city rules, then I can't do anything. That's a civil matter between the HOA structure and the stuff like that. So it's a good question because we get that a lot, but I would look at the actual language of your HOA. Many of them are very similar, some are a little bit different. The 6-month thing is a little bit different. I hadn't heard that one yet. But if you have more questions, we can help you through that on that particular one as well.
Can I do a follow-up on that? You said that it's common language in 80 to 90% of the, so are you saying that in 80 to 90% of the HOAs out there, they can't enforce that rule?
Well, so we have a bunch of lawyers that work on HOA deeds and covenants, and they have come to these meetings and talked about what just happened in Timberwood Park. And they tell us that it's kind of like a lot of the apartment rental leases, they're very common, right, all that stuff. But what they said was the language that basically says you cannot run a commercial business on your residential structure. Many HOAs believed, and that's not the exact phrase, but that's what they thought, said, well, you can't run a short-term rental. That's a hotel. You can't do it.
Right.
Well, what the Texas Supreme Court said was that language doesn't say that. It actually says a short-term rental is more residential than it is commercial in that language. A head on a bed is a head on a bed is a head on a bed. Now, you could write a specific HOA deeds and covenants that specifically says thou shalt not allow or run a short-term rental in your neighborhood. But a lot of them are doing that now. So there are a lot that don't cover the situation right now. They thought they were protected. Many of them thought we didn't need an ordinance. The city of San Antonio didn't need an ordinance, so they were regulated. And as soon as that came out, a lot of them said, we need an ordinance in San Antonio to control this a little bit. That's what we heard.
So as I understand it, there's a 16% tax?
Okay, I'm sorry, so get back to that. So
the question on that is not just the tax amount, but how is it paid, how is it enforced?
Sure. So the tax amount total, San Antonio hot rate is 9%. 7% is general occupancy and 2% for the convention center expansion. So that's how it is. So 9% is COSA. We also collect the 1.75% for Bear County, and then there's the additional 6% for the state. So all that adds up to 16.75 total, and then it just gets divvied up, right? So yeah.
But I think the state gets it from Airbnb.
The state, yeah. So if you're paying your state the 6% to Airbnb, yeah, that's right. We don't collect, but the city's finance department, we collect it, and then we hand the 1.75 over to the county. So it's just, we have a lot of those agreements with the county where we share some services through interlocal agreements and stuff like that. But the total rate, I mean, a lot of times we get asked, it's the 16.75.
But is it collected through Airbnb?
6% of it is.
But okay, but the other part.
The other part is not, meaning you need to collect it, and then you need to report, and you'll set up your hot finance account with our finance department. So I handle the permit piece, and we have our counterparts through the portal that we've created for this, where you can set it up and then make your monthly payments.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
To piggyback on the HOA thing, my understanding of the ruling was the difference between a CC&R, which is just the regulations of your HOA, and what an actual deed restriction is, which is actually tied to the deed of the property. So in areas where there were actual deed restrictions or covenants that was written into the deed and filed at the courthouse, you're not able, they actually have the power to enforce the no short-term rental. Whereas if you just had a set of CC&Rs or just your regular HOA rules, they found those to be unenforceable at the state level currently. So that was something we had to deal with our HOA in the townhouse complex that I live in, actually, and now they're approved.
This is for Sean, and I guess you guys partly answered the question as far as the HOA and COA for condos. But do you personally do any condos?
For the reason of HOAs, I've always avoided them, so no.
So you guys covered the HOA piece, thank you.
Mike, is all of the counties in the state of Texas regulated by one law as far as these Airbnbs go, or is it separate for each county?
It's actually separate. There's not one law statewide. It's in the last two legislative sessions, they've tried to create one state law. It has not made it. It's not necessarily counties that are regulating it. It's our different cities that are choosing to do it. The state law for HOT, right, for the hotel occupancy tax, that is statewide in terms of the 6% and then maybe a local county and city tax. But not every city regulates and requires a permit or sets limits on how many you can have. The city of San Antonio chose to do that through city council and mayor. Like, for example, the city of Austin has essentially banned type 2 in neighborhoods. That's an oversimplification, but essentially has banned them. So that's a very strict one. Others have chosen not to regulate at all, but for the hot. And others have a little bit maybe less stringent ordinance, maybe just collecting a permit for some safety issues or something like that.
I know a couple in Tarrant County, and they were shut down short term for whatever reason. I just wondered if everybody went under the same laws. Apparently not.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Hold on. One thing I want to talk about as we move forward, there's a whole class of two big areas that I want to talk about, and we can go through the questions, but let's try to direct some of these. I want to know more about the tools that are available for Airbnb, because we keep saying Airbnb, but that's just one platform, it's one process. So how do we, and I'm not saying I'm asking this question, but this is something we need to know more about. The tools, how you can do your postings easier, how you can post across multiple platforms, how we can do comps to see if an Airbnb is viable. So that's a classic questions and things we need to be thinking about. And then just marketing. You know, how do we reach out? How do we get the market? How do we increase rates and that kind of stuff? So go ahead and ask them some questions, but I'd like to hit some of those questions too.
Maybe? I'll walk this way a little bit.
Hey guys, Ian Lemke, current investor. Seth, hey, what's up? Maybe a question for this gentleman in the blue jacket. That was everything. As far as just data analytic tools, like this gentleman said about, I'm going to charge $90 this month, $150 this month, and when to charge what. Just kind of like DNA of Airbnb yet.
So there is a software called AirDNA that does give you reports, but I actually don't recommend it because you have to be able to interpret the data, and the way that they get that data is not necessarily hygienic, if you know anything about data hygiene. But you can do your own homework. So if you're buying a home, you do your comps, right? So that's level one. And then you go and you get on the Airbnb platform and you can actually do market research by secret shopping, kind of, reverse engineering. I have a video on my YouTube channel. It's an hour long on my process of doing exactly.
I highly recommend it. I highly recommend it.
It can be boring, but it has some nuggets in there. So you can basically see, look at different properties at different occupancy levels. Like you'll search for 8 guests, you'll search for 9, search for 10 guests, and it'll tell you how many homes there are on the platform, and it'll give you a price distribution map. And it'll show you kind of what your expectations should be. And then you can click and check availability as if you're going to book, and it grays out the dates that people have for reservations. So if you see that a house is charging $1,000 a night, you can go and check their calendar and see how many nights a month they're actually getting booked. So you can.
Is there historical data?
AirDNA claims to use historical data, and so you do have that if you wanted historical data. There's AirDNA, there's AirGMS, and there's a few other out there that collect data like that. Wheelhouse is really good if you are looking for something active that'll let you know what prices you should charge. Wheelhouse is a free version where they don't automate your prices, but they give you all their insights. It's a pricing algorithm. That one's good.
It's kind of like Zillow.
Yeah. It's kind of like Zillow. Yeah, but you pay 1% of your revenue if you want them to automate your platform. So if you're on HomeAway.com, which is kind of like Airbnb but like a sidekick, HomeAway has a work into the website that gives you a market minder and tells you what prices you should charge, and lets you know if there's a special event coming. It'll say, alert, special event this weekend, you should raise your rates. You should be making 6 times as much as you're making on your home if your single rooms are doing better than your whole home. Your pricing strategy, for example, a big group of 12 will book further in advance. So your prices for 3 months from now should be optimized for a group of 12. Your prices for 2 weeks from now or a week from now should be optimized for a group of 4 or less because of travel habits. Bigger groups have to plan ahead. And so HomeAway will do that. Booking.com has a pricing feature. They're usually integrated into the platforms you can book with.
So what about when you're doing listings? Are there tools that will list on more than one platform, and then if somebody books on one platform, will it take it off the other platform?
Yes, they're called channel managers. A channel manager is where you link them all together. So, because one big thing is if you're on HomeAway, Expedia, and Airbnb, you could get a double booking, right? You have 2 people booking the same night on 2 different platforms because they're not the same company, and that would be a nightmare. So, channel managers will charge you money to link your calendars. That's the main reason why people use a channel manager. And some of them have the lazy man's listing feature where it's like, hey, let's just integrate your listings onto these platforms for $50 or $75 a listing. But you're paying $50 for 10 minutes of work per listing. So if you want to automate it, you can, but it's really not that important because the front end work on setting up a short-term rental is the furnishing and setting up the listing. It's like a front end commitment, but after that, it's pretty easy to manage the property. And so just be prepared to do a lot of work your first week, you know?
This question is for Sean. Sean, when you're looking at a property where you're, somebody's renting it and you take over as the tenant, but you're using it to Airbnb, is there a special contract or something that allows you to do that, or is there any legal obstacles that you have to face?
Sure. Is this a sublet where somebody else was the tenant and then you took over their lease, or is this where you're starting a new lease with the landlord?
Starting a new lease.
So you need the landlord's permission, which with single-family homes, this is usually easier to do because you can sit down with the landlord, take him to lunch, and maybe make him a deal. And you're looking for what's called a waiver. A waiver is where the TAA lease in paragraph 30 says you can't list on lodging websites. The TAA in paragraph 12 says you can't sublet. If you get the landlord to give you written permission to waive those 2 paragraphs, that is really technically all that you need. So with a property management company like Downtown, let's say there's a high-rise owned by JP Morgan Chase Bank and Greystar manages it, you would need the owner's permission to waive the terms of the lease. Otherwise, if Greystar has permission to represent the owner that well, each building contract is different, but if Greystar has the right to waive lease provisions, you could get a property management company to then give you, it's called a written waiver of certain articles in the lease. And that's really all you need.
If you don't mind, I'll just jump in on that because through our permit process in San Antonio, that question came up for subleasing, and we ask, are you the owner of the property? And we have a way to verify that. You certify it. If not, we will ask for the owner's permission. So you'll have to provide us that written document that says, Mike owns the property, but Aaron wants to, sublet and then run it. So we look for that documentation up front before we issue that permit. Now we don't really care about what the language of your agreement is, and we won't check the contract or whatever. But that's an important piece to bring down or submit to us through the portal, and we'll review that. So.
What happens if they just go ahead and do it and don't pull the permit, and then both the owner and the tenant are sent a fine from the city? This happened this week in San Antonio.
Sure. Again, with any set of rules, we have to have some penalties, right, or some ways to get into compliance. But we want to discourage people from trying to break the rules, or so we will issue fines. They will be in the hundreds of dollars by the ordinance. I think it's $200 to $500. Class D misdemeanors. We start with that. Usually those will get people's attention, and they'll come down and try to come into compliance. If they do it fairly quickly, we have ways working through the municipal courts to make it kind of a slap on the wrist. If it doesn't, and they don't come into compliance, they keep doing business.
So we get a couple of free passes.
Well, I wouldn't say free passes, because again, we do have the political climate here in San Antonio that really respects the ordinance that we have, but they want good enforcement. So I'll work with you, meaning my team and I, but at the same time, I also can pull the power into your home and all that stuff. We don't want to go there, but again, I really hate doing that. Some people, when I do it to someone, they think I like it. I don't. But.
Okay. Do they get microphone? Okay.
Hi. So I myself am a co-host. I guess you could say I have my own business in it. I started about a year. No, I won't say about a year. About back in January. I'm a big avid follower of Mr. Sean, and I really do appreciate you showing up. Actually, it was a surprise to me. I saw Airbnb on Facebook. I said, why not? My biggest concern, and I guess I don't know if y'all are very into it, but I love Airbnb. I've always had. I live 60 miles west from here. I'm not in the San Antonio area. I live in Kerrville. And I've noticed that the performance of Airbnb in Kerrville is a lot more different than a town north of it, which is Fredericksburg. And if y'all don't know what Fredericksburg is, it's a very rich German town, very winery place. I guess my question is how does one manage, or are you able to, find the performance comparison? Does that make sense? How do you account for that? You know, the mileage, there's a 20 mile difference on there, but it's also, compared to Fredericksburg, Kerrville is more of a retirement town. So it's very difficult on, I guess you could say, the percentage, because I'm looking at...
You're talking about supply and demand, right? Basic supply and demand.
Yes. Well, what is how can I account for that? You know, I would love to come to San Antonio, but if, like these ladies do, they clean their own houses, I'm coming from Kerrville every single day for to do the job as a co-host.
You need to move. Jimmy Napier told me 30 years ago, you're not a tree. Go to where the business is.
So for those that don't know, a co-host is somebody who's both not the owner or the leaser that is doing short-term rental operating, but somebody who represents mostly an owner and just does all the management and doesn't actually collect the money. The owner of a property will pay like a fee, like 15 to 25% typically, for somebody else to run the property. That's what a co-host is. So there is a market for that. And your question is about how to discern if there's enough activity in Kerrville, right? So what I would first do is I'd look to see how many total listings are in Kerrville at the total number of guests that you want to host. Like you can do single family homes that can have 10 guests. You'd look to see how many properties there are. And then I would look at all of their calendars and see how many of them have a pretty active calendar, if any at all. You'll notice that the more premium price properties may have less total volume, but they'll make more margin per property. And then, of course, you'll just go down the ladder until you find like the economy places that are charging like $70 a night for the whole place, and hopefully their calendars are booked. If the low price listings are not like booked, 6 weeks into the future by at least 40% over the next 6 weeks, then I'd be a little concerned about starting listings there. You can't, unfortunately, see how many actual views one gets in a uniform way, but Airbnb does tell you this information sometimes. So if you're searching to go travel somewhere, like Kerrville, like you're acting like you're a guest, below the book now where it says what day are you arriving and day you're leaving, Airbnb tries to sell you on that space. So they give you these little nuggets, like this place is rarely ever available. It's a hidden gem. That's a sign that they stay over 90% occupied. So you can actually check off the list. This one's 90+% occupied. One will say 300 people have seen this listing this week, and like 20 people are viewing this listing right now. So they'll actually give you some metrics. You just can't pull it in a uniform way, unfortunately. Sometimes they'll say this listing is like $50 less than it normally is, and then of course that doesn't help you for market research. But there's little tools. You just have to do a lot of like actual digging, one listing at a time. But Kerrville sounds like it's nice and small. So your sample size is small, and you should be able to spend maybe 4 to 6 hours on the platform and get all the data you need.
I think he brings up a good point, though, and I'd like to maybe talk about this, is he's bringing up location. Where do Airbnbs work? Where are the niches? Where are the places people may not think about? Like, is it near hospitals? Is it near universities? Is it near resort areas? I mean, where do you want to look for your Airbnb?
So, Brenda, what type of guests do you typically get at your space?
We're getting quite a variety. We're getting some people that are studying in the medical area because that's where we're
like
near.
Students?
Right. And when we listed our whole house, because it's central to pretty much everything, that's what we put in our title. And we're getting the groups that come in are wanting to go in a variety of places. They want to go to downtown, they want to go to La Cantera, and so they appreciate that they don't have to,
So
fight
you're
traffic in
saying
some of
like
those specific
located
places.
to school and centrally located to sites of interest.
Yeah.
Like a tourist. Okay.
Yeah.
Were some other things that we would find? Like, for example, in Houston, the north side of the airport in a really nice neighborhood flooded. And so all those houses were available. And I look at that and I think it's right by one of the largest airports in the country. And is there a need for people to stay near the airport and near shopping? And so what would your target be? How do you know a good area when you see it?
If you're by the airport, there's things called crash pad, like other services that you can link your property onto where flight attendants will actually stay at your space. When I consult for real estate guys, I'll tell them you want radial proximity from points of interest. So write that down, radial proximity. What that basically means is you can buy a house in a neighborhood that's not awesome, but if it's a mile away from a point of interest, it'll perform similarly to a house in a more expensive neighborhood that's also a mile from the same point of interest. So buy a home in an opportunity zone, right? That is blocks away from where somebody wants to go. Like stay for parking house.
The opportunity zone, or
like where you get like incentives from the city,
right.
Or if you buy in the opportunity zones, usually those places are decently beleaguered,
designated opportunity zones that are across the country.
Yeah, so you get advantages to buy in places like that. So try to find where you can actually kill two birds with one stone. You want to be close to something, like close to the airport, close to Houston. You want to be by the Toyota Center, the red line that goes through the city so people can go down to the rodeo. That's big. The business district, of course. So Main Street is where it's at. Sonder is expanding in Houston, and they're picking up everything in the medical center because it's between downtown and between energy, and it's on the red line. So that's where they're focusing. Surprisingly, the Galleria is terrible because it has a bloated amount of hotels. So everybody gets to stay for cheap in the Galleria. So if you have a luxury property, the Galleria in Houston's not a good spot because there's an oversupply.
Real estate's really expensive in the Galleria.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's a big factor. And so another thing, if you want another fun jargon for it, is consumer avatar. You want to look at what kind of consumer goes to the part of town that you're looking to pick up a spot in. So you don't necessarily say, I want to service college students and then start with that and go find a college student-friendly place. You can find a house that you think would perform well and then ask yourself, what is my consumer avatar for this neighborhood? And then you start to design your space to compete to be the best at serving that group of people. Like Airbnb called me, actually I got a call from somebody, and they said, hey Sean, we want you to know we want you to pick up more disabled friendly homes. I don't know if you got that call, but they were calling a select number of hosts. And so if you have roll-in showers, you're going to get just a ton of business as opposed to somebody else. So if you're by the medical center, focus on hypoallergenic. So try to keep your space as hypoallergenic as possible. You can advertise that. Disabled friendly is something you could advertise with medical center. And you're going to get a lot of long-term stays, like traveling nurses, doctors, people coming in for childbirth. In Houston, I get a lot of that in my spots near the medical center. So pick the house and then try to discern which is going to be your ideal client and then build your design for that.
We have clients that do really well over in the Lackland area. There's a graduation 50 or 51 weeks a year. Acquisition, I think John showed earlier, those properties are still readily attainable for a cash buyer and are appreciating. And these guys are getting upwards of 60-70% lease rates on them.
Yeah, we still get a lot of people coming in for Lackland graduation and stuff.
Hey, thanks for that. I've been waiting a little bit. I kept telling Jim, don't raise your hand. I'm listening. This is good stuff. So thank you. I appreciate it. I came in a little bit later, so you might have covered this already, but my partner and I, what's that?
We did.
Oh, you probably already did? Yeah. That's my luck, right? So, anyways, we are looking at doing some Airbnb in the county. So how is the permitting and the hotel occupancy tax affecting that? Since we're not in the city, we realize we're not there, but what do we need to be heads up?
Sure. So right now the county doesn't have a short-term rental permit. Again, they'll have a hot hotel occupancy tax rules. The city actually collects those. I mentioned that a little bit earlier, but the city will collect that portion of the county tax and then distribute it to them. So if you have one in the county and you want to give us like an address or something like that, we can hook you up with our finance leg. Zeke can be kind of and our team can help you there. But there's no permit requirement that says you have to pull a special permit, pay the $100. There's no limitation right now in terms of there's no zoning laws in the county or anything like that. But there is a tax payment too. So we can help you with that.
Well, my question is for Mike, if we were going to go in the avenue that Sean's doing, and let's say this apartment complex takes up a whole city block, is it still going to be kind of the 12.5% rule as far as the number of units, since that's already a multifamily commercial space?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So that's actually the discussion we're having with actually Sonder in particular, because they came to us as we were developing the ordinance. So it took us 2 years. We get to the finish line, and near the end, we started learning a lot of this particular model, which is grabbing up some of the traditional apartment leases and stuff like that. But right now, you are subject to 12.5% by right, even in an apartment complex, okay? There is some discussion about modifying that a little bit in the future to allow a little bit more of what you're doing by right? But right now, it is 12.5% by right. So Sonder, for example, has come in and gotten a bunch, and if they want more in that unit or that complex, they'll have to go through the Board of Adjustment process to ask for what's called a special exception to get those additional units. As of right now, no one's done that yet, so we're really not sure how that's going to work. But there is still an opportunity to get some of that, but maybe not the whole building. If you actually want to be the whole building, if you want to do what John's doing in the whole building, you actually can just turn the building into a hotel. And what we actually have to do is go through the certificate of occupancy change of use process. Take some inspections, take some whatevers, and we can actually even help you with that, because if you want to know how much that will cost you to do that, there is a very simple way to help. We can give you some advice after inspections. But so there's a possible avenue. But that may run into some zoning laws and some zoning changes needed. So,
another quick question for you: when is it no longer considered time frame? It's no longer considered a short-term rental.
30 days. 30 days is the law. So anything under 30 days is short-term. Anything over that will be long-term, which is the whole You guys probably know those rules better than I do.
Mike, just for clarification, because I'm not sure I understood the answer. So let's say there's a block, it's got 100 units. So that means out of that, it's 12.5%, so 12.5 units out of that 100, whether it's across the front, the depth of it, or whatever, because that's part of that block. So is that correct?
Correct. So that's, you're allowed by right. Type 2 units. You can actually have all of them could be type 1 units.
Well, the other thing, you keep saying by right, and I'm not sure what that means.
By right is a term we use that says the code is written so that if you meet these 3 or 4 or 5 criteria, you're allowed by right to do it. Meaning I am required by law to give you your permit. So we go through this. So you have your smoke detectors and this, that. But when we talk about density, we'll say you're allowed this many by right before you have to do anything special. So if you were over that threshold, I'm going to deny your permit because you don't meet something. And you can either decide to go to another property in a neighborhood that maybe doesn't have, or maybe divvy up some rental properties or apartment units. So we can have that discussion with you. Or you can go to Seth, as one of our Board of Adjustment members, and there's a process where you can apply for the right to have more than the 12.5%, or be that next 15%.
So it's like a request for a variance.
It's a request for a variance that will, that's a general term, but we use the term allowed by law, called special exception. And then the issue there is, if you are granted that special exception, you're granted it for 3 years. And in 3 years, you have to come back to renew through that. The check and balance there that was written into the law is, so if you prove that, that you can be a good, steward of, your property, your neighborhood, the neighborhood doesn't, feel the public nuisance issues that we were talking about, they're probably going to give it to you again in 3 years. We'll see. But if you really become a problem in that neighborhood and we struggle and you're on that teeter-tottering line, there's a good chance you will not get that special exception. And so it's a 3-year thing. So that balance we talked about a little bit earlier.
I have a question. Sorry, my voice was almost gone, but this is for Sean. My name is Monica. We've done Airbnb for years. We love it. Florida and Hawaii, and now here in San Antonio. But since you sublease, that is one thing we haven't done is multiple units like that. Are you getting permits for each one of them? And then are you doing it with type 1 since you're under your name? How does that work?
I have 2 answers. One, if you're an LLC, it's technically not subletting, and I'll explain this. When you're a company and you sign a lease, you're the leaseholder, and you have to declare an occupant that's going to live there. So your subleasing is where that occupant, the one who's supposed to be living there, goes and finds somebody below them. So if you're an LLC and you're formed like a business, you're just declaring an occupant that stays. So it's technically not subletting in a lot of states. Second, I don't do business here in San Antonio. I drove from Dallas right before I got here. So the cities that I do business in don't require permitting. None of them yet, actually, except for Philadelphia requires that you get a commercial activity license if you're going to have stays less than 90 days. So that's Philly. But the buildings that I'm in have those. It makes my life a little bit easier already, which is nice.
And then, so you look for places that don't have an HOA either, correct? So.
For the sake of speed, I was really just jamming as fast as I could. So I would basically use my relationships to pick up more property. So I'd make a pitch to a property management company. They would like me, and then I'd ask them for more units in more of their buildings, and I'd grow with the property management company based on that relationship. So because I started with apartment complexes, I didn't have like regular landlords that I built relationships off of, and I was able to expand as fast as I liked with the relationships I have. And that's the main reason why I haven't done HOAs. And of course, I was always a little concerned about HOA law. I never wanted to get caught up in one that I didn't see it coming and got shut down. So I thought it was safe to stick with apartments.
That makes sense. And then do you have somebody managing like the Airbnb platform since there are so many bookings? I mean, we've done it just with a few properties and it's a lot of hand-holding, a lot of communicating. So do you have somebody who essentially does that for you? Do you have a process?
Yeah. If I'm going to give you advice on your organizational structure, have a housekeeper per 5 apartments. Have a property manager starting at 15 if you want to separate yourself. And per 30 apartments, I would hire, at the 30 apartment mark, I would hire what I would call a reservation coordinator. And they're pretty much quality control to make sure people are reading their house manuals, their check-in guides, they understand that this place is non-smoking, no parties, and they also handle all the resolutions. So if somebody smokes in your house, the housekeepers will take photos, they'll send photos to the reservation coordinator, the reservation coordinator will then start a resolution process, like all that extra busy work. As you scale, you're going to add roles. So 5 units, a housekeeper, 15, property manager. At 30, you're going to hire an assistant to do all of your guest customer-facing stuff.
That makes sense. Thank you.
We're going to have to shut it down for the night, but can y'all hang out for a few minutes and answer questions if people want to come up and ask them and get their
I have
phone
a
numbers?
question for the group in general. How many people came here as Airbnbers?
That's impressive.
Awesome. Really, really awesome. And how many people want to do Airbnb now?
That's the entire REIA. Wow.
Well, what I'd like to do is, I'd like if y'all can hang around because we just scratched the surface, obviously. And can we give them a big hand because these guys
Do you need to do this like twice a year? Yeah? About twice a year, do a semi-annual B&B summit? Okay.
Yeah.